Shalom, everyone. Welcome back to Sipore Aminu, Stories of Our People. I'm Rabbi Heather Miller from Keeping It Sacred, here with my esteemed colleague, Rabbi Sarah DePaolo.
Shalom. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. It's good to
I'm
be
so
together again.
excited. It's so good to be together again. I'm so excited to talk with you today about Parashat Vayakhel, the portion for this week. And I heard a very fun fact about it in your personal journey. Would you like to share with us about that?
Yeah, so this Torah portion has a very special place in my heart, and it probably always will. When I was in rabbinical school, I gave my senior sermon on this particular Torah portion. So I think it's always going to be forefront in my mind. It's that process of writing a senior sermon for anybody in rabbinical school is really a labor of love and an exciting opportunity to study one Torah portion very deeply and think about what you want to share with your community. And it's a big moment for a rabbinical student. Now, out in the rabbinical world, it's not such a big deal. We give sermons all the time, but at the time, it was very special.
Well, every time that we can, dive deep into the text and pull out these gems, right, and then offer them up, they really are these free will offerings, which are so, a part of this Torah portion is these offerings. I'd love to hear, what did you talk about for your senior sermon?
Oh, thank you. So I talked a little bit about the moment in the Torah portion where all of the people are bringing these free will offerings that you've mentioned to help build the Mishkan, to build the traveling sanctuary where God will dwell. And there's a set of people who have skills. They're artisans who know how to take these raw materials and turn them into something holy and sacred and beautiful and astounding. But then they start to get overwhelmed, actually. People are so incredibly generous with their donations, with their free will offerings, that the artisans go to Moses and they say, there's too much. We don't know what to do with all of this. And the text actually says in that moment that the offerings were both dayam, which means enough. We remember that word from Dayenu. It would have been enough at our Passover Seder. And then also yoter, too much. And I talked about that balance between when we are overwhelmed with abundance and what a gift that is, actually, but it can literally be overwhelming, and how to navigate that process. And there was one rabbinic commentator in particular who had picked up on that line. And so a lot of commentators said it was just enough. That's how we should understand it. But there's actually one commentator who says that no, we should read that line as it is, that even though it seems like there's a contrast, that there's too much and enough at the same time, that when you are bringing free will offerings to something holy, to create something sacred for God, God will make it be enough. God will help you find a way to use all of those offerings and turn them all into something useful. And I thought about what that could mean for all of us when we want to share of our hearts and our gifts, and we don't want to be turned away, and how sad that would feel if we did get turned away when we're bringing something that we want to offer to God.
And that acceptance of that gift by God, right? We remember
Mm-hmm.
the Cain and Abel story, making me think of the Cain and Abel story where, Cain brings the offering, but it's not accepted by God. And what that sparks that root of jealousy with his brother Abel, and what happens when we don't accept gifts. So I love that you brought in that in this case, when you're building something sacred like this, when you're not trying to just one up your brother or, try to say, look at my gift, it's the best gift. I recently saw some TV show where they said, like, no, we want you to open your gift now because we want to see you open it, right? That kind of giving is not really for the person who it's intended for. It's for yourself, your own aggrandizement. So if you're not giving that way, if you are giving of this free will offering of your own heart, right? Kol nadiv libo, right? If you're giving from the generosity of your own heart, that pure generosity, if you're tapped into that, it can be enough. I love that you're talking about that, and that you've shown that God will say it is enough and make it enough. I love that.
Thank you. It was a very special moment in my rabbinical school career, and it's special to be able to share it with everybody here as well.
I love that. And from the New York campus of HUC.
That's right.
We
We're both from the HUC-JIR New York campuses, and here we are in Orange County now.
Amazing, from New York to LA, but originally from Los Angeles. I think you were originally from Southern California too, right?
No, I'm from New York originally.
Oh, wow, amazing, great.
Yep.
Well, I love that whole idea of the free will offering as well. There's the part in Exodus 35:5, which talks about Kol Nadiv Libo Yavieha et Trumat Adonai. So every heart that is generously moved, right? Everyone whose heart moves them to bring a gift to God. This idea of what happens when your heart is so moved to bring that kind of an offering. And so for many people, that whole idea is that it's this free will, it's this voluntary kind of an offering. And that idea, it shows that, when you're giving to the building of this Ohel Moed, this tent of meeting, it's a free will offering. And what's interesting is how that contrasts to the idea of the half shekel offering that we're also commanded to give, right? That every person, even if you're poor, even if you are receiving from the communal pot, it's your obligation to bring a half a shekel to the continued maintenance of that sacred worship space. So the free will offerings are, for the creation of the space, and then the continual manifestation of the practices are funded by the people as a half a shekel every single year. So that whole idea that you can give a free will offering is really, really interesting.
I love that about this particular portion in particular. And I think that there are these moments, this portion especially has all of these references to our hearts, that there's free will offerings that come from our hearts. There's also a sense of wisdom that comes from our hearts. There's the spirit of creativity that comes from the people's hearts. It's a very heart-focused portion as well. It really kind of taps into not just our intelligence and our thoughtfulness, but also our emotional connection to what it means to create something holy, and then also to participate in that process. And I think for a lot of people, just being able to have that hands-on participation. So some people brought financial gifts towards the bringing of the making of the tabernacle, but other people also brought their hands-on skills as well, and what a transformative process emotionally that must have been for them.
Right, bringing from your heart, right? The verb is repeated 9 times in this Torah portion. Rabbi Nechama Leibovitz of last century, she died in 97. She really talked about that, the verb of yavo, of bringing these kinds of free will offerings with love, as opposed to when the creation of the golden calf was being created. People were breaking off the gold and bringing it, and it was not out of the love and tapped into that whole spirit. So there's that really interesting contrast there of that. And then the other part is, you wonder, where did they get the gold to build this Mishkan? They're in the middle of the desert. Yes. Well, this whole idea that we talked about way back in Parashat Truma of the Israelites when they left Egypt, there are some commentaries that talk about how the Egyptians, the Egyptian people were sorry for having enslaved the Israelite people. So they gave them their gold, and that's the gold that was made with the golden calf. And when that was ground down, this is kind of a way of taking that same gold that was meant as an apology, that then became an idol. And now people are in a loving way from their own heart saying, you know what, this precious material should be actually built to create this sacred space. And so that traveling of that gold mined from the earth and then brought through this process is a real tikkun. It's a real way for there to be a fixing of a higher level of sanctity. And of course, that's going to feel good, that you're going to create something beautiful and holy for all time with this gold and with this process. So I can only imagine how much the Israelites' hearts were swelling with love and with pride, and to create such a thing. I worked in fundraising before becoming a rabbi, and this whole idea, you always
That's
talk
an
about
important job skill.
yeah, and I loved it because it really truly was a way to invite people into the process of building something sacred, whatever the mission was, right? I worked for JTS doing that, right? I worked for the Liberty Hill Foundation working on social justice. I worked for Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. All of their missions were so holy and so sacred. And so when you are inviting people in to give a free will offering, because obviously it's not mandatory, you're inviting them into building this sacred space and this sacred institution that will help perpetuate values for the future. And I think that message comes through loud and clear with this Torah portion, that giving really can feel so heart lifting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I noticed that a lot actually recently. So a number of Orange County Jewish communities have partnered with HIAS in order to help resettle Afghan refugee families. And Shir-Ha-Ma'alot, where I am, we're one of those communities. And the way that people have responded to the idea of participating in something holy, something that is part of our commandments to love the stranger as ourselves with their hearts, has been overwhelming. And I think it means a lot to people to be able to participate in these sorts of communal building moments through a religious lens, through their Jewish lens, through a holy lens.
Totally. And it gets us out of this, harsh individualism of the world, right? It reminds us of the communal nature of our people, and the importance of being able to partner and lift each other up. And then that lifts up God as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You were talking earlier about Bezalel and about the artisans and how they were gifted with also, right, another gift experience in this Torah portion, how God gifted him and gifted the people with the skill and wisdom and understanding and knowledge and craftsmanship to be able to know how to craft this sacred space.
Yes. And again, it's described as like a divine gift, that creativity could be a way that Bezalel and other people can express their spirituality, is really kind of a powerful image. And personally, I'm very jealous of creative people. I wish I was more creative because it really does sometimes appear and look like an incredible expression of spirituality. It can, whether somebody feels connected to the idea of God or not, but when they're in that creative mode and that pathway, it, from the perspective of somebody who doesn't really think they're terribly creative, it can really look incredible and wonderful.
And even if, it's not regarding creativity, right? Even if it's just, with regard to love of Torah study, right?
Yes.
Our texts say that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had this glow of Torah around him because he was in the zone. He found his zone and he found a way to fully self-actualize through his study of Torah. I was just reading the autobiography of Will Smith, actually. It's called Will, and it's not just about, it's called Will because that's his name, but also because he had this will to find his path and to get on his path and just go. And you can, when you see someone who's so self-actualized in all of these areas of music, film, industry, he's a creative type, yes. But, there are so many people that, you just see inventors and scientists. My brother is definitely in his zone trying to, 3D print organs for people, right? Like he's dedicated his whole life to it, but he is in his zone. So it's such a challenge for all of us. And it reminds us also of the travesty when people's self-actualization is stymied in any way. How much worse are we all for it, right? What if Bezalel's dad said, no, you're not going to be an artist, you're going to be a doctor, right? Like the Jewish people would have been far off worse for that, right? So it's not about trying to make everybody a perfect cookie cutter version of anyone, but really helping people find their zone and fully self-actualize. I think that that's a responsibility that all of us in society have for each other, to help each other succeed in that, and we'll all be better for it.
Beautifully said. You know, I'm thinking about all of your description of being in the zone when somebody's really, they've found their will, their calling, as it were, the thing that they are meant to create in this world, whether it's artistic or scientific or study of some kind, the thing that is really going to help them focus and really speaks to their heart. It can be hard to stop yourself, and because you're just constantly going and going, and there's this drive. And then the first moment of this week's Torah portion, though, is about stopping, is about Shabbat, and about saying that even the creation of this holy space, even the creation of the place where God is going to dwell amongst you, has to also follow by the rules of Shabbat. And so Moses gathers everybody around and says, before we start this whole process, I want to remind you one more time that 6 days a week we create, and 1 day a week on Shabbat we stop and we rest. And even this holy creation also has to cease on Shabbat, because you need that refreshing. You need that moment to stop and reflect on all that you've done in order to be able to continue your drive.
Amazing. Yeah. Nechama Leibovitz talks about it like even the creation of the tabernacle doesn't override Shabbat. So just that idea, you must rest, like even creating a sacred holy space like that. It reminds me of pulling together these two threads about not stymieing someone's progress and their self-actualization, as well as the rest on Shabbat. There's that story about Hillel. It reminded me of the story about Hillel, and Hillel, before he was Rabbi Hillel, the founder of Beit Hillel, the house of Hillel, right? He was just a boy who didn't have enough money to get past the guards in the house of study of Shemaiah and Avtalion. He couldn't pay the fee. So he was literally shut out from that kind of learning. And it's such a travesty of what it could have been. Yeah. He overcame it. He did not let that stymie his learning. Instead, he decided to go onto the roof of the study hall and listen through this skylight. I still don't understand how the architecture of skylights could happen 2,000 years ago, but we'll go with it.
Yes, I've often wondered that myself.
Right? Did they have like vinyl top? Anyway, so he was up there, and it was Shabbat, and they were studying, and he was listening to the lesson, and it was cold, and a storm blew in, and he was so enlivened by this text, he stayed there until he almost froze, and he fell over on the skylight. Shemaiah and Avtalion looked up, and they saw, I'm sure you know the story, they saw that there was this covering up there. And he said, is that the figure of a human being? So they and their students went up to the roof, and they said, oh my goodness, there's a person up here. Quick, students, go get some fire. We've got to warm this guy up. And the students paused and they said, wait a minute, it's Shabbat. Can we possibly do that? And they said, that's where pikuach nefesh, the value of saving a life, trumps even Shabbat. So we think about this. So first of all, thank God they did. And thank God Hillel survived. And thank God that they let him in to study for the rest of his life. And he was able to create these, amazing tradition that he beats Shammai every single time, except for 3 times in the whole Talmud. But the idea that, the order here is the building of the tabernacle is on the low end of the spectrum. Then it's this, celebration of Shabbat and the observance of Shabbat. And then it's saving a life. So we can see that, I think that the Jewish people have a good set of priorities there around, what's most important. If you ever wondered, that's what's most important.
We know how to prioritize when it's necessary.
Right. Lists and prioritization.
Yeah.
Well, I've loved this conversation with you. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope that our viewers have enjoyed it as well. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.